understand what type of membership type they are. Some members do not need to renew with SERO. If they're on the dues deduct or the lifetime or the AMBA auto renew, their membership is automatically renewed, either monthly or yearly. The only people right now that would need to renew are those that have an expiration date on their newsletter. Some of the other news is our SERO executive board is reaching out for members who might want to come join them on the board. There are several positions, and you can contact any board member or myself here at the office, and we can talk to you about that opportunity. Sorry about that. We do have some need for some chapter leaders in our local areas. We're starting up some new chapters, and some of our chapters have already started. And we do need some leaders to help with those chapters as well. Down at the pension system, those of you that are keeping up with all the communications realize that they've gone to more digital and electronic communications as well. I know that they're doing the focus by email, and I'm sure that there's some people at the pension system who do not have emails as well. And I'm sure they have a system set up to get the information to them. If you do go online, there's an online account that you can sign up with SERS. That's at www.ohsers.org, or their toll-free number is 1-800-878-5853. For SERS Healthcare 2023, it's all good news. The only changes were pretty much beneficial for the members, some lowering of copays, and other small changes, but mostly they were all beneficial. The SERS executive director has come out with a new little article that I've been staying in touch with. It's called Myths and Misconceptions. There's a lot of good information he's going to put out there to keep the retirees knowledgeable about things that are going on that could potentially affect the pension. So if you have the ability to go on SERS website, I recommend that you do that and look for that item as well. The SERS COLA for 2023 is stated to be 2.5%, and that is the cap. They're not allowed to go above that unless their financial actuaries recommend that they do that. There was a lot of discussion, and they had discussed the potential of going above that, but they already knew the market did not look that good in the future, so they wanted to stay responsible and kept it with the 2.5%. With Medicare, you probably are aware that the Medicare Part B premium is lower than last year. I believe this year it's going to be $164.90. The annual deductible is lower as well at $226. For Social Security, you should all be aware. If not, you're going to get a nice surprise in your benefit. The COLA increase for 2023 is 8.7%. I know this is going to be discussed later on in our meeting, so I'm not going to get into any details, with the exception of we want to make a point that you look at your tax situation and make sure that this is not going to put you in any adverse tax liability situation. We've heard that some people who qualify for some programs might not get those, and other people, we just don't want you to have a tax liability at the end of the year for this good thing that you're getting monthly. So look at that. We do have voluntary withholding forms for both Social Security and SERS. We're happy to email those to you if you would like those. And I know those forms are available on both of their websites. The other item I was going to update you on, and it's not the best of news. We all know we were working real hard to get the web passed. Suffice it to say, two representatives had two very, not extremely different bills, but there was some small differences in their bills. They could not get together ultimately at the end of the year, and we do not have a WEP change for 2022. Unfortunately, this means it's probably going to have to go into a bigger legislative initiative or push, which is going to include Social Security and the GPO as well. We're disappointed. because we know that's going to be a lot more work. It's probably going to take a lot longer, but we will do as we do now and inform you on all those changes and what we can do to help with those efforts. So those are the updates that I have. If you want to start the rest of the meeting, I'm finished.
Okay, well, thank you, Valerie. And we're going to go into in depth a little bit more on a couple of the items there that you mentioned. So that's a great teaser tickler for us here today. So, and as Andrea shared, you know, we're so proud of our relationship with SERO because it was the first association that AMBA started working with. And as we sit down with members throughout the state, oftentimes, you know, we're asked, you know, well, hey, you know, what does SERO do for us? And you could hear from what Valerie said, they're in there really fighting for you and watching your back while you folks are out there enjoying retirement. But just to give you kind of a brief overview of how the association impacts the forces that affect our retirees, you know, first and foremost, you know, they are your pension watchdog group. And, you know, they also help to preserve those health benefits. They're your representative, your voice. SERO also helps connect our members to the communities. And that's why Valerie, when she was talking about the local chapters getting reinvigorated and starting some new local chapters, that's why it's so important that we find folks to step up into those leadership roles to help plan events for those local chapters. So again, if you know, you're interested in that, to help get that launched and started, please reach out and talk to Valerie about, you know, how you can get involved in your area. And then finally, really where AMBA comes in to help solve those problems, SERO offers a lot of important exclusive benefits and discounts to our SERO members. And we're going to talk about some of those things today. And if you've not sat down with one of the AMBA reps here in Ohio, or if you haven't been to the SERO website to see the benefits that you are entitled to, you know, we strongly encourage you to do that. Because one of the things to keep in mind is, you know, when you left your employment, you may not have had everything covered. So through these group negotiated benefits, you know, you can fill the gaps that maybe weren't covered by what you had while you were still working or what your present coverage is today. Many times things weren't portable. You know, maybe you've left the state. You know, when we do these for the other associations, we have a great number of retirees that aren't even living in Ohio anymore. They've followed the grandkids or chased, you know, the retirement dream. So, you know, were you able to take your benefits with you when you left employment, left the state? And then, you know, just realize that you can extend your benefits to parents or other family members who maybe weren't eligible for the same types of benefits you had while you were employed through the school system. And finally, you know, through these benefits, you can help to prevent you or a loved one from having to take extended time off. Because keep in mind, when a lady leaves employment to help take care of a family member, that actually impacts our retirement in the sum of actually $364,000. So, you know, just know that your association does have solutions to many of these problems. And today, Jim, we're going to talk about several of the things that folks can consider to really button up some of those things and not be blindsided by expenses that are out there. So Jim, share with us exactly what we're going to do today.
Yeah, so today's Teaching Tuesday webinar goals are to really, you know, just clarify some of what Valerie shared with the changes in Medicare and how to be a smart healthcare consumer in 2023, a little bit about the windfall elimination provision, the WEP, Social Security changes, and then we also share, you know, the big gaps that a lot of our retirees have in their retirement. Some are financial, some are healthcare crisis related, but just those big pitfalls, and then share some financial tips that members can act on immediately. Unfortunately, with inflation, you know, or a recession, however you define it, looking at, you know, the stock market down 15–20% for some, you know, any financial tips where you can put some additional money back in your pocket and get through these times. Talk about RMDs. A lot of our members don't really understand required mandatory and there's been some positive changes for our members, you know, post-COVID. And then finally, Bonnie will wrap up with some latest discounts. A lot of our members aren't really aware of discounts that they're eligible for things that they're already, you know, purchasing that might get additional discounts through their association. So as Val shared with you, you guys can take a picture of this. Bonnie will also share some information via email to those participating. But in 2023, the cost of living increase for Social Security is a whopping 8.7%. It is going to average $140 a month to those receiving Social Security benefits. And typically when one goes up, this next one goes down, or when this one goes down, the other one goes up. But these are all working in our favor for 2023. Medicare B payments are indeed decreasing from the current $170.10 a month down to $164.90, a savings of $5.20 a month. Again, not huge, but considering we've had rate increase after rate increase after rate increase, it's really nice to be going the other way. Now, Valerie made a huge statement. I want to make sure everybody caught it, that $140 a month for an individual, potentially, $280 for a family, times 12 months, that could impact your tax bracket, your income bracket. So folks that are on the cusp of, between 12 and 14% or whatever that next level bracket is, make sure you understand how that additional income through Social Security is going to impact you. And then again, although small, everybody out there typically pays a Part B deductible. In 2022, it was $233 annually. First time you see a doctor, use a service in that year. Going into 2023, for those on Medicare supplements, Part B is dropping by $7 to $226 annually. So all good news. Now, there's also some additional services that Medicare is going to provide that they didn't in the past. So we call them 2023 Medicare reminders. There are over 30 preventative and screening services that are now going to be covered under Medicare, even more so under Part D. Many of the vaccines, obviously COVID, but the big one is shingles. No out-of-pocket costs. That's a huge deal. And for our members that are dealing with insulin, and we have several amongst the 4 associations we work with, insulin is a major catastrophic out-of-pocket cost for type 1 and type 2 insulin-dependent diabetics. That will now be capped as of January 1st at $35 a month. This will save some of our members literally thousands of dollars a year. It's absolutely fantastic. Now, I do have a bit of bad news. If you are not 65 yet, if you are still on major medical, which, we are here, if we're on insulin, unfortunately, we're still going to pay retail major medical, drug costs. But once you are, and it's unlikely this is going to go away, but once we do move to Medicare age 65, it will save us an immense amount of money. Before I get to that last bullet, I do encourage everyone to get out on Medicare.gov, create a little profile online, type in your information, your zip code. It'll talk about what you're eligible and where to get some of these vaccines locally. It'll show you a list of what you may not know you're already eligible for. And we'll talk later about how important it is to take advantage of these preventative screenings, with everything that's going on. The last thing I'm going to share about this slide was there's about 83 million folks on Medicare. 0.03% of them, unfortunately, there was a Medicare data breach, and 250,000 retirees in the country are going to get new Medicare cards and new ID numbers. It was not, where they're able to extract any personal information. It wasn't anything where you have to worry about identity. It was simply that the information was breached, and your private capital letters, capital numbers, Social Security number will ultimately be changed. If you are one of that 0.03%, you get a new Medicare number in the next 30 days or new card, you'll know exactly why. But it's such a small percentage. It's unlikely any of us, but I just want to mention it. Thanks, Bonnie. So why are we talking about all these risks or the gaps in Medicare and preparing yourself for 2023 and beyond? A lot of for anybody that's joined our prior Teaching Tuesday webinars or has had a review with Andrea, Bonnie, myself, any member of our teams, they've seen this slide. This is actually from the Congressional Budget Office. It came out or released in 2018 is exactly when we got it, but it talks about the cuts in Medicare. And there have been $716 billion cut from Medicare in the last 7-8 years. And a lot of people say, well, why? Why, the market was doing really well the last 13 years. Why were there cuts in Medicare? Well, there's 2 reasons. The biggest is the baby boomers began turning 65 in 2013. they have a devastating effect on Medicare, the money going in, the money going out. There used to be what, 8 or 9 workers for every one retiree. Now there's like 1.5, 1 3/4 of workers for every retiree. You know, they're cutting in the areas of hospitals. They're using something called observation days. And if you don't have 3 midnights in a hospital, you unfortunately may not qualify for additional care under the Medicare umbrella. Medicare Advantage rates are going up and deductibles are increasing, Medicare provisions. But the areas where we can help, where SERO has gone out and said, hey, these are major gaps that we need to address with our retirees, they're those bottom 3 or 4. And those are, if you need elder care, home health, assisted living, nursing home. And I'll tell you, for our members that, you know, have nursing home plans, I mean, good for you. 74% of our retired men, 78% of our retired women or their spouses are going to use some form of care. It's become the #1 reason for medical bankruptcy. And SERO, along with Ohio retired teachers, public employees, and police and fire, have gotten together and negotiated these amazing plans that are affordable. I also want to plant a seed. A lot of people thinking, do I need long-term care? That market has changed dramatically in the past 2.5 years because of COVID. I worked in that market, ran nursing homes for years of my career. Everybody wanted 3 years of nursing home care in their long-term care plan. Not anymore. I mean, after spending 2020, 21, part of 2022, not being able to see our loved ones because of the fear of COVID getting into a facility or retirement home, you know, the pandemic getting into the facility and spreading, taking, you know, unnecessary lives, people are really leaning toward home care simply because of COVID. But think about this. In another 8 to 10 years, the market will be dominated by home care because facilities are going to be chock full of the baby boomers with cognitive concerns. Those receiving care for Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, anything cognitive, they're going to get priority. Unfortunately, well, I should say fortunately, nobody wants to be in a facility anyway. We can get that care at home. But unfortunately, if you're not prepared, a lot of that's on us. The other services that make up the $33 billion toward the bottom, those are things like medical transport, which we'll share in a little bit, but again, not fully covered by Medicare and catastrophic for our members that need emergent trauma or secondary tertiary medical transport. So Bonnie, you want to go to the next slide here, talk a little bit about the SSA 44 form?
Yes, and Jim makes a lot of good points. You know, there have been a lot of changes with Medicare, and sometimes they change with no notice. You know, and he and Andrea and myself, I mean, we do continuing education every week to keep up to date so we can deliver the most up-to-date current information to our retirees as we do those benefits reviews. And many times we're asked, well, hey, you know, I got my statement and it says I actually have to pay more for my Medicare next year. And I don't think that's right. You know, perhaps you've had a life-changing event, like you got married or divorced, or you had a spouse that died. Perhaps you were working or you know, so you stopped working now, or your hours were reduced. And maybe, you know, you had a money-making property like a rental house or you know, a vacation home or something that you would rent out that you've lost due to a disaster. And then, you know, maybe for some reason a pension stopped or it went down. You can appeal that and file what's called the SSA 44, Medicare Income Related Monthly Adjustment Amount, where you know, tell Medicare, it's like, hey, I this isn't right. I need you, you know, to adjust my Medicare payment. And that form can be found on the Social Security website. You can just type in, you know, go to the website, type in SSA 44. Several of us have helped retirees fill this out and, you know, do the appeal. So you're not paying as much for your Medicare. So don't, you know, just know that there are ways around that. And that's some of the expertise that we bring to the table there. And then, you know, Valerie talked about the windfall elimination provision. This is especially important if you or someone you know is getting ready to retire. I'll never forget, about 4 years ago, I was at a local chapter program that they'd put together. You know, hey, if you're getting ready to retire, you know, come and hear, you know, about what you need to do. And there was literally a lady sitting there who had previous life working, before she came to the school system, had paid into Social Security. And when she found out about this thing called the windfall elimination provision, she literally put her head in her hands and said, do you mean I will not get all of my Social Security I was planning on? She ended up, she had to work about another 4 or 5 years to, make up the difference. So folks, if you are getting ready to retire, you really need to understand how the WEP, windfall elimination, is going to affect your Social Security if you have that. And my recommendation is always sit down with the folks at Social Security so they can put all the numbers in. You can check all the numbers that they have, or you can actually go to their website and do the calculator. And just know that, because of the pension, the type of pension we have here in Ohio, and unfortunately, the windfall elimination only affects about 3% because not every state has the same type of a pension system that Ohio does. Just know that the WEP could actually reduce your Social Security benefit by up to half of the amount of your pension. And as Valerie stated, they've actually been working on this for over 4 decades now. And unfortunately, it comes and it goes, but because there's only, less than 3% that it affects, it doesn't always get a whole lot of traction. Well, last year, they actually got closer than ever because they actually had over 300 sponsors of a bill to, get this reformed. So now what's going to happen is there's actually the politicians have actually pledged to identify a compromise here in the near future. So we're crossing our fingers and hoping on that. But I will tell you, all of the Ohio associations, this is forefront that they, get some kind of relief here. And when we talk to folks about the windfall elimination or the government pension offset for spouses, they always want to know, well, gosh, can they reduce my Social Security to 0? And actually by law, Social Security cannot be eliminated entirely. However, Social Security can set maximums on that dollar amount. And the max reduction for 2023 is $558 for those filing at full retirement age. So again, folks, these are things that's probably, specific to your situation. And certainly, one of us can sit down and help guide you through this process. And folks, just a reminder, as we go through today, if you do have a specific question, go ahead and put that in the Q&A and chat, and we will answer your question as best we can in a timely manner. So so as we talk a little bit more about how things affect us, insurance, entitlements. One of the big things that as we sit down with retirees and we talk about their medical coverage, because that is a huge chunk out of the budget. And if you're getting prescriptions, that's something that's in your face every month, when you go to the pharmacy. When we sit down to do benefits reviews with folks, we always ask, it's like, okay, what type of plan do you have? What's your copay? What about your deductibles? What's your co-insurance amount? And what is your maximum out of pocket? And Jim and Andrea, I don't know about you, but I usually, when I say, hey, what's your maximum out of pocket? I usually get like the deer in the headlight look because most folks don't understand what that is or just aren't familiar with that. So one of the things that we strongly encourage is that to be a good medical consumer is that you actually know and understand your plan. And one of the things to keep in mind, here's 5 tips. So if you haven't been taking notes, you can start now. But 5 tips to really be a better healthcare consumer. Understand what that insurance coverage really is. Do you have networks? Do you have copays? What is your maximum out of pocket? Does your plan have any perks or incentives to it? Meaning, if you're on a like a JJ Walker or a Joe Namath Advantage plan, do they give you frozen dinners and rides to the doctor? Are you, cashing in on that? Do you have like a fitness perk? If you have that and that's the reason you got it, make sure that you're utilizing that. And then also too, to be a good medical consumer, ask for pricing transparency. I had one retiree that lived in Richmond, Indiana, needed an MRI and actually drove to Tip City, Ohio, because the MRI was actually going to cost her less by, getting in the car and driving for about 40 minutes. And then also know too, that there's things that Medicare does that, the way they do their procedural billing, that changes. And we had one retiree that was excited. She needed a scan, and her doctor had this, the scanning machine in their office. But Medicare came back and said, oh no, we only pay when that machine is used in a hospital. So it was a decline charge. So make sure that you are asking questions. Shop around for those services. And remember, do not skip the preventative care. I mean, Jim went through, a list there. Over 30 different things have been added by Medicare. And again, next month when we do Medicare 101, we'll get into more of the nuances and the differences between Medicare Part A and B and Medicare Advantage plans and supplements. So we do invite everyone to bring a friend to that next month. And Andrea, several of our SERO folks have the opportunity to have the Aetna plan through SERS. So having, just talked about things they need to know, why don't you give some highlights on the SERS Aetna plan?
Hi, sure, Bonnie. So on the Aetna PPO plan, a lot of you have that plan that have 20 years or more in because it's deeply discounted. Now, for the spouse, unfortunately, they don't get the discount like you do. And I highly recommend that you do that Teaching Tuesday next month, because we're going to go over the option that's available to the spouse through the SERO endorsed Medicare supplement plan. So that's available. With this plan, it does have silver sneakers. So those of you that like to get into that, I highly recommend you take advantage of that. Also, just as a reminder, if for any reason you opt off of this plan and go onto the JJ Dynamite plan or something like that you see on the television, unfortunately, they won't take you back. So you have to be very thoughtful about that. As you can see, it's a pretty good plan. On the right-hand side, you get quite a few health screenings at no cost. And then I want to also remind you that in network, you've got a $3,000 deductible, and out of network, whether it's a hospital or doctor, it's going to be a $6,700 out of network deductible. And then if you're on one of those border counties where you're bordering another state and you doctor in the other state, I highly recommend you do a benefit review so that you can verify that your doctors are in network. And I'll take it back to you, Jim and Bonnie.
Good. So one of the things that I want to make sure everybody's aware of are the gaps in your present coverages. And it really doesn't matter whether you're on major medical or whether you're on Medicare. We all have these same gaps. The only difference is we really don't start talking about them until we move to Medicare, which is the first point in the second part of our life where we want to consider, what are our new coverages. So again, whether you're on major medical or on Medicare, the big gaps out there are home health and facility care. Again, there are restrictions as to how you qualify for elder care, whether it's home health or facility care. And if you don't meet those restrictions, it is on you. And unfortunately, again, the number one reason for medical bankruptcy. With regard to cancer, heart, and stroke, we call those the big three. 90% of us will meet our maker because of one of those three events or some side effect of. Now, School Employee Retirees has brilliant lump sum options for cancer, heart, and stroke if you're worried about that specific disease state. Cancer is its own deal. If you were in a hazardous environment, taught, or I should say worked in a school with asbestos and your neighbors have dealt with cancer, it's something you need to talk about. If it's in your family genetically, it's something you need to talk about. Heart and stroke, I tell our members that a little less urgency there if you have elder care in place. A lot of our members think, well, I see all these gaps, I need to button up all of them. If you have elder care in place, some form of home health or facility care, when you deal with a cancer, heart attack, or stroke, you already have someone to come take care of you or a place to go to get back on your feet until you can go home. So for some of our members, if they have elder care in place, heart and stroke's a little kind of double dipping, but again, it's there if it's a big deal for your family. Medical transport. This is actually the one that shocks most of our members. Most people, because of family members and histories with cancer, heart attack, or stroke, they know if I deal with an event, it's an expense. Nobody calls us and says, hey, Jim or Bonnie or Andrea, I was expecting this $7,000 bill for a medical transport. Nobody does. In fact, they want to argue Medicare law and understand that that is not controlled by Medicare. It's controlled by the Federal Aviation Authority. Of somehow, way, shape, or form, medical transports always seem to I'm not sure if there's a lobbyist or what it is, but they seem to find their way to wiggle out of the Medicare guidelines on what Medicare is going to pay. So I can tell you, if you dial 911 on present day Medicare and pretty much your major medical, you are going to have most of your trip covered to your closest hospital. If you're on the Aetna, Advantage plan, you're going to have some skin in the game. It won't be catastrophic. But if they say, hey, Ms. Bonnie, we can't help you, we've got to get you to Akron, Toledo, Columbus, Cincinnati or Cleveland, a trauma center in Ohio, that second trip is indeed on you. Medicare does not cover advanced life support, trauma, secondary or tertiary medical transport. So when you hear of somebody that has that ridiculous bill, even for a ground transport, or gosh forbid, somebody that had $35,000 or $40,000 because they rode the helicopter to Columbus, that's exactly what this is. And your school employee retirees not only has a plan, but it's 45% discounted from what's out in the typical, general market. And then final expenses. It's shocking. We'll talk about the 5 things that can really, put a crack in your nest egg. Final expenses, a spouse or a loved one passing, it's shocking how expensive that can get. Go ahead, Bonnie.
No, and you bring up a lot of good points, Jim. And all of this really goes to the crust of being financially healthy. So for the next part of our program, we do want to talk about things that you can do to be financially healthy in this coming year. Now, obviously, makes sense, spend less, right? So maybe do a budget, because I'm sure no one can call Columbus and say, hey, I'm running a little short this month. Could you put a little extra in my pension check? So, think about doing a budget, do some planning and organizing, and we're going to give you a tool to help with that here in just a moment. Look at all of your insurance coverages and really get to be a good insurance consumer. And we're going to give you some tips and tricks on that. And then also, Jim's going to cover, protecting your nest egg into the future. As we get started, we think about the 3 big budget items beyond healthcare and health issues. So housing, transportation, and food. So as we look at this, the average American spends about $37,000 per year on these big 3 items. And what we're finding now is more and more retirees actually still owe money on their home. They still have a mortgage. And so as we look at tips and tricks for each of these, many times when we have folks that still have that mortgage, with the way things are going right now, if you do have an adjustable rate mortgage, you might want to look at locking that in. Things have been crazy in the last, 18 months, 2 years since COVID hit in the housing market. So now might be the time. And we have other folks that say, oh, I'm just going to downsize. The house is too big, or, I'm going to get something smaller. And if that's the case, just remember the housing market has been crazy the last 18 months or 2 years, and things are starting to stabilize a little more. But sometimes even if you move smaller, you might have a home, an HOA fee, which really does add expense. So just make sure that you look at the total solution there. And then some folks do this house hacking, which I thought was a unique concept or unique name. But that could be, many of us are familiar with Airbnb. I have a couple folks that work for the school system, and they do that around times that Miami's doing a big parent weekend or something. But some folks just take on a roommate. Look at the Golden Girls TV show. That's how those 4 ladies got together. They needed a roommate to help with those expenses. And then, there's boomerang kids, and Jim's going to talk about that here in just a little bit. But just because, we supported them for the first 18 years, if they have to come back to the house, doesn't mean that you can't have an adult conversation with them and that they help support and pay for utilities, rent, or even, other expenses there around the house. And then, of course, another form of house hacking is if you do have a building or an outbuilding that maybe you're not using as much anymore, you could use that to actually rent to folks for boats or campers or anything like that. So folks, look at the assets that you have and get creative with it. How can you make your assets help pay for your expenses? And then also, DIY repairs. There's a lot of YouTube videos out there, how to change a light bulb and things like that. Or maybe you swap, different things with neighbors up and down the street. If you're good at plumbing and your neighbor's good at drywall, maybe that's how you get some DIY repairs done. Now let's talk about your vehicles. I'm sure as you've driven down the streets, you've seen the new car lots are pretty empty. The used car lots are pretty empty. Do you have a vehicle that's not being used that you could give up and turn that into an income stream for you? Do you have a vehicle that you're just not driving as much, and that can actually impact your actual insurance? And I'll talk about that in just a moment. And then finally, when it comes to meals, because you're a member of SERO, you have access to the passport to savings, and that passport can actually help save you if you're dining out or for meal prep. And I'll go over that here at the end of the program. So when we look at, different insurance checkpoints, you folks might want to take a picture of this, things to look at. This is a great time of year to evaluate, the insurance that you have for your auto, your home, and your life. And some folks say, well, when is the best time? It's like, well, when you're thinking about it, or, when it comes time for renewal. So since you're thinking about it, now's a great time. So here's the things that you need to look at as you really analyze it and see, hey, how is my insurance? As we look at the cars, what is your deductible? Do you have some mattress money that maybe if you can stand a higher deductible, that would decrease your monthly premium for your car insurance? What is your liability coverage? Is it still, the same as it was when you had kids in the house? But now that's changed, or perhaps your car is 20 years old now. So, do you really need the coverage that you have in that plan? What about mileage usage? Did you used to drive from Springfield into Columbus, Ohio? And now, you go to Walmart every third day of the week. So, think about, can there be savings with mileage? And then affinity discounts, say, hey, I was a school employee. Are there any discounts for public service workers? And then any special coverages, like did you have your dog, in there, and now your dog has passed away? And shop around. And just remember that when you're shopping around, be a good consumer and look at any type of renewal discounts or accident forgiveness you might forego if you do change insurance carriers. Now, as we look at the house, think about what is your replacement value. If you had to take it down to the slab and rebuild, is your policy covering that? And keep in mind too, the changes that there's been in construction and building materials here in the last 2 years. Does your plan cover what you want? What's the deductible? If your house is in at a $200,000 home and you have a 1% deductible, that's $2,000. But if your house is really only $100,000, there's a way to save some money. Think again about liability coverage. Have you had any major renovations? Do you have any separate deductibles, like for a tornado or a flood? And then, again, shop around and can you bundle it? If you put your house and car together, are there savings options there? And then when we look at life insurance, this is always an interesting question that sometimes we kind of knock people off their feet when we ask. It's like, well, do you still need it? It's not unusual for us to walk into a home and find somebody with 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 different life insurance policies. Do you still need all of those? Can you find all of those policies, that you have? Do you have term or whole health? Do you still need term? Do any of those policies have nursing home riders? Are their premiums increasing? Many times with a term policy, it goes, your birthday present is every time you have a birthday, your term life insurance goes up. What options do you have? And these are things that Jim or Andrea and I can really help you out and help not only translate it, but help make sure that you're not spending money that you don't have to, and that you have the type of coverage that you want. Now, how do we plan and organize all this? So one of the neat things that we put together is a checklist, and I will be emailing this to everyone this evening. It's a checklist that has about 9 different buckets in it, and I'm going to go through those today, but we call it the ICOD. Now, this isn't a fish, Jim. It's actually in case of death or disaster. And many of our retirees who use this have like a plastic file folder. Or I have one retiree that spends time between the Dayton area and Florida, and she has all of her important documents color-coded in those little plastic bags down in a cooler. So when, they call hurricane, or when she's ready to move back to Ohio, she just picks up the cooler with all of her documents and she's ready to go. But as we look at this, again, the 9 buckets, the first one is life events. Do you have all of your birth certificates, marriage certificates, divorce decrees, any adoption paperwork for adopted children? Do you have those at hand? And then when we talk about life insurance and retirement, do you have those life insurance policies? And if you do, have you looked at the beneficiaries lately? Because more times than not, we see where there was an heir, there was a spare, and then the third child is, I guess they didn't care. So make sure that you update those and have your beneficiaries listed. What about your death and service documents or pension documents? If you pass away, what's left to your spouse? Does your spouse know that? Do you have any annuity paperwork or details from your state pension entitlements? The next bucket involves banking. Where are your bank accounts? How many different banks do you use? What are the account numbers, the passwords, the logins? How many credit cards do you have? What are those credit cards? If your wallet gets stolen, folks, do you know what's in your wallet and who you'd need to start calling? So the ICOD helps you collect that information. So in case something like that does happen, you've got it right there. And then finally, what about maybe you have a home safe? Do you have that combination written down? It took our family 2 years to find the combination after my father-in-law passed. And then what about safety deposit boxes? We had one retiree that got a brown envelope with about 20 different safe deposit box keys in it and had no idea what banks they went to. So make sure, folks, that you have all of that information together. The next thing that we look at is, take your assets and liabilities and separate those. Assets, things that what you own. So property, land, cemetery deeds, any type of timeshare ownerships, car titles, stocks, IRAs, bonds, corporate ownership, proof of loans. And then when it comes to liabilities, what are your mortgage details? Do you have a reverse mortgage? What about your timeshare, your cars, your home equity loans? And then finally, your monthly expenses. Look at that. This is a good way to find things. Look at your utilities, your insurance, like we've already talked about, your rent, your mortgage, your loans, memberships, your membership to SERO. And then any subscriptions that you may just be having automatically deducted to like Netflix or Hulu or things that maybe you don't even use anymore. So it's a good time to go through those and maybe find some of that money. And then with the email and social media, I got one of these little books and they sell them. You can pick up to keep all of your passwords and account numbers and everything in. I had one retired state highway patrolman tell me one time, get a little 3-ring binder, put it in there and then put it on the shelf with your cookbooks. Because if the house is broken into, most thieves don't steal cookbooks. So all of your stuff can be right there. But if you pass away, how do folks get into your Facebook account or your email accounts, your cell phones, any streaming services or computer passwords, any type of contact details, who's your doctors, your AMBA representative. We get phone calls all the time from survivors that say, hey, I don't know what mom's got, can you help me out? And we do that because, we're here to help our SERO members. Who's your attorney, your minister, your financial advisor, your accountant. And then finally, the essentials. Where's your will, your trust documents, your powers of attorney? Folks, remember, there's a financial POA and there's a medical POA. Do you have an instruction letter? What are your final wishes when it comes to burial or cremation? And again, folks, I know this is a lot of information, but I will be emailing you a little document that has all of those things worked out. And it's important to not only pull this information together, but also to have that conversation with your spouse, your family members, your loved ones. I just recently had a retiree that I work with, and mom fell a couple weeks ago and ended up in a rehab facility. Then dad fell, ended up in the same room in the rehab facility. Couldn't wake mom up the other night because her hearing aids were out and she couldn't hear him. So he actually called all the family members in the middle of the night to go over many of these things that are in this ICOD document. So Jim, probably the middle of the night was not the time to have that kind of conversation with the family. What would you recommend is a good time to have that conversation?
Right now. And when I say right now, I am talking to our retirees who have parents in their 80s that they recently retired. You need to have this conversation with mom or dad. And if you are the parent in your 80s and you've held everything close to the vest, you need to have that conversation with the trustworthy children now. And let me explain why. This picture you see here, everybody knows it's kind of a joke with an AMBA that I still use paper and pen. I'm kind of an old soul. I'm not big into technology. So I had to have somebody else help create these slides for the slide deck for this presentation. And the gentleman who created it put a picture of his mom in there and his daughter. Daughter attends college. Mom's about 80 years old. And over the past couple months, they've started to see mom's cognitive ability decline. To the point where over the holiday with everybody in the same room, she was asking the same question multiple times, forgetting about, different dishes that had been prepared, that she had prepared earlier in the week. Gift giving was kind of a questionable. Did she comprehend everything that was going on? And after December 25th, that day, this gentleman, John, realized that his 2023 goal is to get his mom's finances in order because she is going to need them, whether it be for elder care, whether it be for, just taking care of her and asking questions that we all want somebody to ask us. We just don't know it yet. So as I go through these questions, think about how important they are that you either ask your parents or your children need to start addressing with you for everyone's benefit. So Bonnie, flip to that next slide, if you will. So here are the questions. And some of these are a little difficult. My family, I come from one of those that, everybody's kind of self-made, does their own thing. We don't share our finances with everybody else. But once you get to that age, or your parents do, where do you keep your financials? Where do you keep your estate planning documents? We're going to have to deal with them someday. Can I meet with your advisors? The next time you do meet with your advisor on the phone or via Zoom, or even if I need me to drive you out there, let me go with you to understand what are your strategies and where do you have your monies. You may need to access them for care. Who are your doctors and your medical professionals? What medications are you taking? And where's your pharmacy? You would be shocked, and I know our members that are over 65 are shaking their heads when I say this, but our retirees have this affinity for their pharmacists. They don't want to go anywhere else. The person knows them, they love them. They don't want to go save money for a few dollars if they can still see Bob or Janet. And that's important for your kids to understand. What planning have you done for your elder care, long-term care? And it's not just the financial aspect, so your kids aren't pulled out of their lives, their families, their careers, and it impacts them financially, or it consumes the estate for your surviving spouse, but questions that you want to ask before you're forced to somebody else make the decision. Like, what kind of care do you want? If you need help bathing or dressing or toileting and wiping your backside, do you want me to help you, Dad? I don't want to do it, but do you want me to help, or do you want someone else to do it? You've got to think about these things now and get them out in the open, because they are reality for 74% of our men, 78% of our retired women. Do you want to stay at home? Do you want to move closer to family if you're not at home? Do you want to be alone and watch, Price is Right at 11 a.m. Or do you want to be in a retirement community and watch it with 30 other people, in the common area? What are your wishes for end of life, Mom? Or tell your children, what are your funeral plans and expenses if you haven't already? And gosh forbid, if you do face a medical crisis, what kind of treatment do you want? Yeah, you're good, Bonnie. Thank you. What kind of treatment do you want? Are you do not resuscitate? I have two grandmothers that are, one's 99. Actually, she just passed about 2 weeks ago at 99, and the other one's 102. And, you don't have to ask anybody in my family how detrimental 15, 20 years in a facility is to, a nest egg. So what are the top threats to your personal nest egg right now, today, January 2023? The top 5, as cited by USA Today, number 1, well, they're not in any order, but number 1 we're going through is taking care of elderly parents. If they have not prepared for elder care, you're going to be stepping up, or they're going to be stepping out, whether that means to Medicaid, which is healthcare welfare, or depleting your inheritance or their estate for their surviving spouse. It's a big deal. The death of a spouse without life insurance, it's $12,000 to $15,000 to settle someone, through services. If they've got outstanding debt, that spouse is responsible for that. Boomerang children. Bonnie and I and Andrea and I, we've dealt with boomerang children in families, every home, every week we go into for years. But that rate has increased dramatically over COVID because people lost their job, because the country shut down for 18 months. People had children moving back in with them in their 30s and 40s, which also meant their grandchildren were moving in with them. That was a huge tax without money incoming, coming in to support 3 or 4 more mouths. A medical crisis, any cancer, heart, stroke, embolism, aneurysm, anything. If you've got an Advantage plan, where you've got $3,000 in network or $6,700 out of network, max out of pocket on your plan, any medical crisis if you're not prepared. So talk to somebody about it, at least about what's in your family history, where you're at risk based on your, personal diet or habit practices, and then overexposure to the stock market as we age. It's a little bit different for me or Andrea or Bonnie to be engrossed in the stock market. We've got time for it to recover. But if somebody is 70, 75 years old out there, and we have another 2008, which that little arrow's pointing at, it took 10 years to get back. Our retirees that are in the market at 75 years old, you don't have 10 years for your nest egg to drop 48% and finally get back to where it is today. Your school employee retirees went out and negotiated, along with the other associations, a plan where you can invest in an indices in the market. And as the market goes up, which it will, it always does, especially after a war, recession, any negative news, when it goes up, we make money. And the history is about 4 to 9%. But on the years where it's down, like the last 18 to 20 months, you can't lose a dime. Our money freezes at its high watermark. And I will tell you, I just don't help our members with this. I'm a believer and I invested in it. And I took a major portion. I was not a big fan of the election and how I thought monies would be sent in the government way before the war, way before the trade issues, way before China, way before anything. And I'm one of the few people that hasn't lost a dime in the market in 24 months. And if you have, if you're bleeding, if you will, if you watched your nest egg drop 15, 20%, and you want somebody to chat about and say, hey, what can I do this? You don't understand it. Like Bonnie said, we have so many of our retirees that we walked into their homes. I mean, Andrea's shaking her head, but walking into their homes and these widows have no idea where their assets are. They have no idea even where the life insurance policy is that's going to pay her $50,000 because her husband passed, has no idea where anything is. The last 2 years we've had, especially last year, we've seen the market drop, 20%, but it's compounded by the inflation or recession, however you define it, that we're dealing with. I mean, you look at that poll on the bottom and it looks at, it talks about the increases or the inflation impact of 21 versus 22. That with the market being down, it's kind of a double whammy. And despite somebody did share with me that the CD rates are a little bit higher than what they were posting back in December, as these are showing. I mean, honestly, you're just as good putting your money in your mattress as a CD because it's tied up. So what's the solution? School employee retirees, again, along with the other, pension protection associations, have endorsed a tax-deferred asset protection plan. And if you want information on this, if you're losing money in the market or just simply don't want to take that risk and worry about looking at your portfolio dropping, just call us and ask for, a review to see if you're eligible. There's no underwriting, which I'll tell you why that's important in a minute, but you can participate in the market gains with no downside risk. If the market goes up, you make money. If the market goes down, stays flat, God forbid has a crash, your money's freeze at its high water mark on an annual basis. You can, and I'll tell you, I use the analogy with my retirees that want to know about this. I say, listen, this plan at 4 to 9%, it's not going to, make you rich, but it will keep you rich. You will not lose a dime. And in today's market, I want you to think about this statement that in today's market, our members are much more collectively worried about the return of their money than the return on their money. And this is actually giving our members both. It's got enhanced liquidity. You can take the money out if you need it, gosh forbid, for any emergent situation. It's got flexible lifetime incomes options. So if you decide that money's grown and you want to take it as an income on a monthly basis to increase your quality of life. But why I said there was no underwriting at the beginning, it also has a long-term care benefit. Gosh forbid, knock on wood, but if you deal with any major event, and let's say you do have a small elder care plan that's going to protect you for a year, 18 months. Well, if you do deal with something cognitive that takes you beyond that 18 months, you can use these monies, surrender charge free. They will allow you to use it for any type of elder care. So it's a brilliant way for our members to maintain their nest egg, not worry about any cracks and anything draining out or taking a risk, because if you have money in the market, if it's what they call variable, it's Vulnerable. I couldn't think about that word. Yeah, if it's variable, it's vulnerable. And right now, that's why everybody's seeing these big drops out there.
And Jim, if we do have investments, there's some good news on that front too when it comes to required minimum distributions.
Yeah, RMDs are something that confuse a lot of our members. They're fairly simple, but in their essence is RMDs are the government getting its share of your money. As we age, we put money away. The government wants to tax that money. So if you have an IRA, stands for individual retirement account. If you have a rollover IRA, a SEP IRA, a traditional IRA, a 401k or a 403b, spouse has one or the other, a 457 account, those are all calculated or considered in that required minimum distribution. And based on your age and health, based on your age and your net worth, if you will, they're going to take a portion of that. You're going to be forced to take it as income, and then they can tax that income. And that goes up a little bit. Now, if you have a Roth IRA, if you are talking about your pension money or CDs, money in a money market, anything you have already paid taxes on, they're not considered. But the other, 5 you see above are. So let's talk about the what and the when for RMDs. The what, again, it's a portion of your savings accounts based on your age. That amount grows each year as you age. So your amount at 73 will be a little bit less than, your amount you need to pull out at 74 and 75 and so on. The amount is based on the account balance from your prior year. And here's where Bonnie was suggesting that there have been changes with RMDs that are positive. If you are 74 right now, you would have started taking your RMDs at age 70 and a half. But in 2020, we started to see the impact of COVID on everyone's financials, and they decided to delay those RMDs for 18 months and let people hold on to their money a little bit longer. Well, part of the Secure 2.0 Act that we've been talking about, that Valerie's also brought up, now in 2023, you don't start your RMDs until age 73. And over the next 7 years through 2030, it will eventually graduate for age 74 and ultimately age 75 before it's revisited in 8 or 9 years. So things to consider, watch out for. Don't forget, there is a huge penalty if you do not pay your RMDs. Now, it was 50%. If you paid $4,000, if you had a $4,000 RMD and you didn't pay attention to it, they charged you $2,000 penalty and you still had to pay your $4,000. It has dropped to 25%, but it's still ridiculous. I mean, just for not doing what you need to do. Now, you can determine where you take your individual retirement account RMDs from. If you have a fund that's performing incredibly well, probably not the best idea to take it out of that one. But if you have one that's struggling a little bit, which most are right now, you're going to want to take your RMDs out of that one. You can also decide if you want to automate your payments. Do you want to do them monthly? Do you want to do them annually? Do you want taxes taken out or not? And I will tell you, unfortunately, these are horror stories that we all four hear, but don't rely on your fund manager, your financial planner, your tax guy to do this for you. They will typically remind you. Most that are good will also calculate for you. But at the same time, this is not their responsibility. You are accountable for your RMDs. Now, what if you have, I'm skipping the one about cash, but let's say you have a much younger spouse. I actually got an email earlier today from another retiree that had an RMD question that has a spouse that is 17 years younger than him. That individual will be able to get a significant decrease on their RMD. So if you have a younger spouse, look into that. And then what if you don't, and then obviously you don't have to take out cash. A lot of people, don't necessarily need our cash. Now, I could use it right now. Most people on the screen could, but there's some members out there that take their RMDs. They don't need that, $1,000, $2,000 right now. So what can you do with it? Number one, supplement your long-term care gap. It's money that's not in your budget. You're forced to take it out. It's money that's coming in. You've got to pay taxes on. It's not in your monthly budget. Button up your gap of elder care. Number two, look at a life insurance policy. It could be final expense for $10,000 or $15,000, like we explained in one of the gaps. It could be, a life insurance policy that's going to fund an inheritance for, a daughter, son, or a grandson or daughter. This is big, and I can't get into the details because I don't fully understand them yet. But if you convert a Roth IRA and pay the taxes on that Roth in 2023, Big changes in 2024. You will never pay taxes on that Roth again, ever. That is significant. And again, I don't know all the details, so please don't hit in the Q&A and say, send me more information. I don't have it yet. This is something by the guru that put this slide deck together and told Bonnie and I about it. And it's crazy exciting. We'll go over that in an upcoming webinar. But there's a great way to start saving some money tax-free coming 2024. Again, reinvest in a non-tax qualified plan, fund a 529 college fund for your grandkids, or make a qualified charitable contribution, whether it's to your church, a local philanthropic organization, a school system, SERO, they'd love to have a charitable contribution. Anybody out there that's qualified, take advantage of those monies. And again, if you need help, Bonnie and I, Andrea and I, whomever else can certainly hold your hand through the process. Bonnie?
Yeah, Jim, and that's right. The tips we've shared today has really been so you can protect your nest egg, so you can, get your finances in order. Because statistically, 58% of us are actually worried about outliving our money. So hopefully a number of the things we shared today can help, lengthen that money. And this is a neat little chart because as we look at, folks who were 65 in 1965 would be the dark blue colors, and folks who were 65 in 2015 would be the light blue colors. Basically, what this says is between men and women, we're living into our 70s more. We're living into our 80s more. We're over 71% of us ladies, and ladies, a third of us are going to live into our 90s. So that becomes the real issue. Are we going to outlive our money? So consider that impact. How are we going to maintain our standard of living? Think about inflation and the life changes. The cancer diagnosis, there's been a lot of advances in cancer, but that leaves with medical bills, the need for home care, assisted living, extended care, like Jim's talked about before. Those long-term care needs, when 78% of us ladies are going to need some type of long-term care. So folks, these are the types of things, instead of worrying about it, get with one of us. We can help, go through your situation, answer your questions, maybe give you more questions to ask. And hopefully we can answer a lot of your questions. So at least what your association has done for you to help button up some of these things. And the last thing that we wanted to cover today was the thing that we promised earlier. Because you're a member of SERO, you have access to thousands of different discounts, and everybody likes to save. So if you've not seen it before, if you haven't seen it on the website, or attended one of your local chapter meetings where we've presented this information, you can actually go to myambadiscounts.com. And that opens up a world of savings and discount programs. And it's everything from, GNC, health supplements to make your health and make you live longer, to things like TurboTax and Tax Act, Calm, if all this is just a little overwhelming, and you need some meditation time. It also has thousands of discounts on travel. The best way for me is go to a beach and look at a palm tree. And then, finally, we talked about home improvements or, purchases for the house. There are discounts on there through Whirlpool, where if you needed to purchase a major appliance or home office equipment, again, just thousands and thousands of savings that are on your passport to savings. And again, you get that because you are a member of SERO. And I know we have covered an enormous amount of information today, and hopefully you were taking notes. But at the end of the day, these are all questions that you need to answer, and this is information that we can bring to you. So again, if you take your phone out and put it in the camera mode, and then hover over that QR code, you can put in there a request for Jim or Andrea or I to sit down with you, do your benefits review, ask you some of those questions, help you, figure out, do you have your copies of your policies? Do we need to order those for you? And again, here later today, I'll be sending you that in case of death or disaster document. So you'll have that you can actually, go through and start getting your financial wellness here in order in 2023. And Jim, I'm not seeing any other questions there. So we do invite everybody to join us the third Tuesday each month. And like we said, next month is going to be Medicare 101. It will be at 1 o'clock, and we'll get more into the nitty gritty of Part A, Part B, supplements, Part D's. We'll kind of unwrap the whole mystique of Medicare. So again, folks, if there's no other questions, we do appreciate the opportunity to bring you the information today, and look forward to continuing our work with SERO. Hopefully we can see you at some chapter meetings. And again, as Val said earlier, make sure that you get your dues in, because SERO is working hard every day for you. And if you could spare some time and help get some of those new chapter new county chapters started, so we can bring you this type of information right to your doorstep. And we did record the program today. I'll get that sent over to Nicole as soon as we get that converted to a YouTube channel, so she can post it on the website, so you can go back and review the information. Or again, feel free to contact one of us to ask those specific questions. So with that, thank you folks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.